Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you?
Muslim, how are you, Safiya?
This is the wellness show with
Angela and Safiya.
Brilliant. We're back for another episode. We hope exciting. Today we have we always have exciting guests. Let's face it, okay? Let's be honest.
That's for me because she's one of my very, 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 very good friends from Canada.
Yeah, we've got someone from Canada.
Hey, Suzanne Lim, and her specialty is she's a doula.
That is really exciting.
Support for mothers who are about to have a baby, like through their whole pregnancy, anyways. Suzanne.
Hi, hello everybody. Hello England and the UK. How exciting! Hello from the Great White North.
Oh yes, is it white now? That's it. It's all covered with snow and.
Yes, it is. This week we've had our first real snowfall, and it seems to be sticking around. So I think that's it. So that's
Suzanne, have a better definition of a doula, because the first time I heard the word doula, I was thinking that's not a really good word, but because it means something in Greek. But
yeah, I know. Let me tell you something. When you have a Greek friend, you're constantly being told the origins of all the English words that you speak, right, Safiya? You know what I'm talking about, right? So yes, I am.
And no, not only the definition, but also that we don't pronounce it properly.
Correct. So yeah, I'm aware of the original meaning of the word doula. I understand that it's a Greek word and that it literally means slave. But the other thing that we know about language is that language evolves and language changes over the centuries and over the millennia. So that word doula has evolved and changed over the centuries to mean something else. It is literally the definition of an entire profession. And I did toy with the idea of not using that word. Some people are not comfortable with it, and some people use the term birth worker or support person or whatever. But I'm fine. I looked within my soul, and I'm okay with that because I don't see anything wrong. I do not have a problem being defined as a person who serves. And that is what my profession is about mainly. I serve new families. And that's okay by me because a life of service is a life well lived, in my opinion. So I don't have a problem with you saying the word.
Like specifically, it means what?
To be of service to somebody who has just given birth, to be very, very specific. And yes, that is what doulas do. We provide support, all kinds of support.
At the birth, right? It's also like starting. At what point do they call you?
Usually, if people are interested in birth support, they will get in touch with a doula before their due date. Some people quite early, as soon as they get a positive pregnancy test, they call a doula immediately. And then there are other people who may not have heard of doulas or just waited. And so you might get a call just a few weeks before the due date. So sometime before the due date, and then a birth doula will attend the birth, like the entirety of the birth, and be there as professional labor support, helping the person with comfort measures, helping with relaxation, helping navigate all the different choices and options that might come up, and help lay things out for the birthing family so that they can make the best decisions for themselves. A postpartum doula provides support after the family is home from the hospital once the baby is born. So that requires help with breastfeeding, help with baby care, help with maximizing sleep, and just organizing the structure of the home and so on to make that immediate postpartum recovery time as smooth and as gentle as possible. So
you're a bit of a wedding planner for the birth. By the sound of it.
That's a perfect analogy. Yes, a wedding planner, a birthing planner. As a matter of fact, some doulas, especially since COVID, have come to specialize in birth planning. They don't attend the births and they don't help afterwards, but they sit down with the new family, with the expectant family, and kind of help them lay out all the stuff that they need to have on hand for after the baby is born, for the baby and for themselves, how they want their birth to go, lay out a birth plan, that kind of thing. So yes, like a wedding planner, except birth.
I think it's great because when you know, reminiscing back on when I was pregnant, the it is even more so now, because at the time internet was there, but it was not as developed as it is now. I was on a few forums, which was really useful, but you get so much information. It's a bit of information overload, especially now. So you're like, well, what should I do? Some people say this is okay, other people say this is okay, maybe I should be doing this, I should be doing that, and sometimes they're like, there must be other things that I don't know of. How can I know everything? So to have someone who's kind of a centralized library of the, you know, birthing information,
Yes.
that's brilliant. So I guess that leads us to our first question, really proper, which is what's the reason that you or other people would go into becoming a doula? What prompted you personally, Suzanne?
Well, what prompted me, one of the main reasons, is sitting right there in front of us. I was at Angela's 6th birth.
Oh, wow.
I was at Agape's birth, and
Oh,
not to give too much information, but there was a short time during that lovely birth where she just wasn't listening. She was not listening to what the midwives were saying. They wanted her to be in a particular position, and she kept moaning about how much it hurt. And I was like, dude, this is your 6th baby. Why are you surprised that it hurts? And until we
like me on my phone.
I had to be really, I remember like looking at her and saying, you need to turn over right now or this baby's not going to come out. And then she did, and the baby came out really quickly. So anyways, the midwife must have been watching the interaction between the two of us. And the midwife said to me after the birth, when, you know, we were cleaning things up and whatever, and she said, oh, you should be a doula. I had never in my life heard the term. I had never heard of such a thing. And I said, oh, what? And she said, yeah, somebody who does exactly what you were just doing for a living. And something inside of me just went click, because I was at a place in my life where my youngest child was getting to the age where I was starting to figure out, I had been at home with my kids for years and years and trying to figure out, okay, so what am I going to do with my life? I also knew that I was going to have to figure that out because my marriage was not in a happy place. And I knew that at some point I was going to be leaving my husband. So I had to figure out, what am I going to do to support my children, of whom there are 5.
Wow.
Guys,
Yeah.
this was
5 children.
That was a home birth, Angela. Is that what you were saying?
He wasn't at the hospital.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was a.
Wow.
So
It was
immediately,
ideal conditions. Oh.
I immediately went home and looked up, what is a doula? How can I become a doula? And when was Habiba born? Like, what was her birthday?
Or in March.
In March. So the closest training was in June. And so I immediately signed up for it, like right away, that training. So that was in 2004.
So that was the question we had as well, is like, so you have to obviously go into some form of training. It's not something you can just invent yourself. Oh, I'm going to be a doula because I like to attend my friend's birth. You have to have some form of training. So what training is it? What does it cover?
So the main gist of being a doula is support, the ability to provide compassion and support. But then there's a big piece of it where your clients rely on you for information and insight. And it's very difficult to provide really good, solid support if you don't know about the process and what you're doing. So there are, so what I have to always say is that everybody has the capacity to be a doula, because everybody, if you are a compassionate person who can provide support, that's it. Those are the foundations of doing birth work. So the birth doula training, it does vary. There are different organizations that offer different trainings. At the time, in 2004, this was a 3-day sort of intense workshop style training where there were hands-on activities, lots of personal sharing, movies, writing. So that's one aspect of becoming a doula. And then after that, you have to attend a certain number of births. There's a whole long reading list that you have to read about and sort of report on. And you have to receive reviews, I guess, or assessments and evaluation from clients and from doctors, midwives, and nurses. So it can take some people up to 2 years. The 3-day intensive workshop, it lays the sort of foundation for you, and then you have 2 years to finish up the rest of your certification. So that's basically how it works. That's how it worked back then. Now there are other programs. There are even college programs that take a year that go quite in depth into birth physiology and anatomy and so on.
So it's kind of not nearly a midwife, but kind of in between, having experience, maybe personal experience of birth, personal experience of helping someone to give birth, and the other end of the spectrum is being a midwife with the nursing training, etc. And in between, you have the doula.
That's right.
It seems like it's a bit in between, yeah.
Yes, that's right. We are. I wouldn't say that we're comparable to midwives in that midwives also often offer emotional support and physical support during the labor and birth process, whereas obstetricians pretty much do not. But we do no clinical work at all. We don't do blood pressure checks, cervical exams, or any sort of clinical work whatsoever. Our role is purely emotional, informational, educational, physical support during the process. It is continuous labor support, which is extremely valuable. So now we know there's research that backs that up, that shows that continuous labor support leads to better outcomes for maternal and infant. Outcomes are much better, much more positive when people have continuous labor support.
Yeah. Do you have any legal responsibility? I mean, in
Pardon?
Canada, in the UK, how it works, but in Canada, do you have legal responsibility?
I don't know what you mean.
Like, I don't know, if anything goes, do you have to have insurance? If anything goes wrong, can you get in trouble like that?
Well, yes, for sure. Whenever you hire a professional, anybody, the professional person does have some legal liability. So clients hire me with the understanding, their knowledge than them of pregnancy and childbirth and the whole process. Now, I do have in my contract that I'm not a medical health professional and that I don't offer clinical advice, and that all decisions they make are to be made with their own responsibility. I have that in my contract. However, I do carry a lot of professional liability insurance just in case. It's just a business expense. Anybody who owns their own business understands that, and you need to have professional liability insurance because there may be something that comes up that your clients are displeased with you, and they have a bad outcome and they feel that the responsibility lies with you, and so you may need to defend yourself against unjust accusations, and so that's where professional liability insurance comes in. Yeah,
that's fair enough. And that's obviously a very good recommendation for anyone. It's the same in the UK. As a fitness professional, I'm very aware of that, and Angela as well in her capacity. So definitely. So you mentioned earlier how you are there for the whole of labor, and many mothers and fathers here, or even aunties, uncles, will know how long labor can last. I mean, my first was like 36 hours or 40 hours. So, and some of them can be very quick. So you've got to be prepared to have quite, maybe a couple of sleepless nights, isn't it? The case, or how do you manage this? So tell us a bit about that.
It's getting harder as time marches on and I get more and more gray hair. I started doing this work 18 years ago. So I was 18 years younger, 18 years more energetic, 18 years stronger than I am now. However, I'm very, very cognizant of the fact that I'm not as young as I used to be. And yet somehow births still take 18 hours, 24 hours, 30 hours, regardless of how I feel. So I have a system. After all these years, I've worked out a system. When Angela, she stays up late and she knows I go to bed notoriously early. That's one of the reasons, because I've always got somebody I'm on call for. So I go on call at about 38 weeks. I become super, super crazy vigilant about my sleep and my nutrition and my energy. I manage my energy very vigilantly during those 2 to 3 weeks of being on call, I have noticed a big difference in how I feel as I leave my house to go to a birth, possibly standing on my feet for 10 hours, possibly, losing an entire night of sleep. And I give myself much more time now than I used to. When I was first started doing this, I had young children. So I would come home from a birth and I would just jump right back into being a mom, homeschooling, whatever. Now I don't have anybody to homeschool, so I can come home, take a shower, and go to sleep for 20 hours if I need to. So I take a much longer recovery time after a birth than I used to. But I'm very aware of what my body needs. And I don't just like live my life and then jump in my car and go to a birth for 30 hours. I can't do that anymore. I need to prepare it. I need to have good snacks and lots of water and tea in my backpack as I leave the house. I need to make sure I'm feeding myself. And I actually say to my clients now, hey, you're hiring a 55-year-old doula. So let me tell you, I will need a break every now and then. I need a half an hour to just sort of lie down in the lounge and close my eyes, or I need 15 minutes to eat, or I need 10 minutes to wash up, brush my teeth and wash my face or whatever. So I have those things built into my practice now that I didn't used to, because I didn't feel like I needed them. I could just jump in, jump out, and carry on. Now I need to be of myself.
And you do one more interesting thing after the birth that I think you should share, because then other people will take it and think, okay, I should take care of myself. That you want to tell them what you do?
What do? I don't know what that thing is. Oh, massage. Okay. So
Angela was mimicking. She was doing some sort of weird pinching the fingers together, because we're on Zoom. So obviously we have the video. She was it was quite funny. I was wondering what that was going to be. Chit-chatting or telling them to be quiet.
Okay. So I can't tell you about this without giving credit to this amazing doula collective that I got this from. I interviewed on a podcast that I used to do these amazing doulas called the Dynamic Doulas. They're located here in Ontario, Canada. And in their business plan, they're partners together. In their business plan, they have written in there that part of their business funds will go to fitness and massages. And I was amazed by that, because this can be a very physical job. And if your body is creaky and aching, you're going to burn out very quickly. So they support each other. They help each other with their children. I think one of them, her husband, they owned a gym. And so the other partner had free membership at that gym to work out. And then the other partner was a massage therapist. So they had that written into their business plan, that the support of their bodies was very important. And I've adopted that people need support. You cannot provide support for other people if you yourself are falling apart. So one of the things that I adopted is that every 3 births, and I have 1 or 2, sometimes 3 births a month, but between 1 to 3 births a month, and then I get a massage, because I really
like that idea that you do that.
Yeah, I'm way more creaky than I was 15 years ago, and it takes me longer to recover. And so every 3 births, I kind of get like everything lubed up and oiled up and squeezed back into place, and okay, then I feel better again. So yeah.
So that leads to my question I had as well, which is because when we prepared this, I had loads of questions, thinking, oh wow, this is the whole world I really don't know. I can just imagine, but how physical is it? Because you say obviously you're not like a midwife, so you presumably don't really handle the baby or whatever once it's born. But in terms of your support of the mother, you say it's emotional support, but is it also physical support? Because some mothers cannot bear to be touched. Some others want to be touched and squeezed and supported and lifted, and they might not have a male, tall, whatever, strong male partner to help them with that. They might have, other partners or no partners. So what's your involvement physically with the mother during the labor period time?
Lots.
So what sort of things do you do then, to give us some?
actually, before the birth even happens, we have one meeting where we practice different labor. That might be like supported squat, or I might show different massage or acupressure techniques to the partner, practicing it on the mother's body and maybe on her back. And we practice all of the physical things that we might put in place to help her cope with labor, and kind of cement that birth team camaraderie between the three of us. Because when we get to the hospital, or even if it's a home birth, I gotta tell you, as I love midwives are my jam, but they don't do very much physical. The midwife is not going to be there rubbing your back for an hour. They're just not. That's not their scope of practice. So who's going to do that? If you need somebody, I've had clients wrap their arms around my waist and squeeze my back fat so hard.
It's got some use. It's got some use at least.
And I feel like I want to scream, oh my gosh. But you just have to stand there and deal with it. Or doing something called a double hip squeeze, where you squeeze the pelvic bones together, while my client, who is 6 feet tall, is standing, and she was swaying back and forth and up and down. And I just had to like squat up and down while holding these long contractions. Oh, it really can be extremely physical. I've also had births where the mother just wanted me to sit beside her and maybe squeeze my hand, or just her and look at her and breathe with her. You're right, not everybody wants to be touched, but most people do want to be touched, and they want to be touched in a very firm sort of kind of way. And
Rubbing,
you need to be there for that. Now, ideally, there's a willing and enthusiastic partner that you can spell off. So I'll say, okay, you squeeze her hips for the 10 contractions, and then then I can rest. And then usually these guys are way in better shape than me, but ideally there is somebody to spell. But I do a lot of work with single moms, so there is no other person there. So it's just me and them. And if it's an unmedicated birth, whoa, those are the longest, hardest ones. Because if somebody is not a girl, then we need to employ all the other tricks to get them through these contractions. And that means a lot of work for me physically.
Sorry, you broke up a bit. So you were meaning like if someone doesn't have any epidural, or is that what you mean, non-medicated? There's no drugs, there's no kind of anything to remove the pain.
That's right. Then it's up to me to help her through each contraction.
So interestingly, because I had 4 births without any help from any medication, no gas and air, no nothing, and I'm not a person who I would consider has a high pain threshold. I really, I'm a bit squeamish, and I can feel pain. So I was actually very surprised. But I think I was determined to get it as natural as possible. So that helped. That sort of, with my husband, we talked about it, where I had a birth plan. And as we know, birth plan often don't go to plan, but I had like my set ideas, and my midwives were always very supportive, will push you as much as it is possible. If it becomes unsafe, we'll tell you. But yes, you can go all the way without any help. But I had told my husband, oh yes, lower back massage, yes, you'll go, because this is where the contractions will be, and more painful. And none of my labors I could not bear more than just a light touch on my lower back. Like I said, just to feel the warmth of his hand was just enough. As soon as he pressed a bit, I would be like, it's just too much. So yeah, that leads me to my other question, which is there will be new moms or future moms listening to this show, and can you kind of tell us a bit more about plans that don't go to plans? It's nice to have a plan, but be aware it will not necessarily go according to plan.
That is a big part of the preparation that I do with my clients, is helping them to come to a place of openness and flexibility, and getting them to accept the notion that that we're not in control all the time. that we don't call the shots all the time, that we can make. I liken it to a wedding, like you used that analogy before. It's a fantastic analogy. Or a trip or a journey. We can plan all we want. We pack all the things that we need. We gas up the car. We plan when we're leaving. We have an estimated time of arrival. We plan our route, where we're going to stop, when we're going to gas up, etc., etc. And even along the way of that well-planned trip, something goes awry. What contingency plans do you have for that possible detour? What plan B do you have in place in case this and this thing doesn't go correct? I speak to my clients about how difficult it is to have an unmedicated birth in hospital, where the ease and accessibility of pain medication is a push button away. It's really hard to not push that button to say, bring me the drugs, when you are in a place where it's readily available. Okay. Having said all that, I think it's important for people to know that good doulas support all your birth plans. So I have clients who right from the very beginning say, oh, 100% I'm having an epidural. And I say, fantastic, let's talk about that. My goal is to have my clients have the most positive experience possible, regardless of whether their birth plans went left, right, or straight down the middle. If one of my clients ends up having a cesarean section after planning all natural home birth, we need to be able to switch gears very quickly, right? We need to be able to look at each. Things are not going the way that we want them to go. So now what? My job is to talk to them about what their options are, instill in them the confidence to make the good decisions, and to let them know that they're safe and cared for. It is not my place to try to put on my clients the kind of birth that I would want for myself. That's not my place. I've already had 5 babies, thanks. I've done it. I had amazing births. I've had experiences in hospital, at home. My most beautiful, amazing birth, Angela was right there in the room with my 3rd baby, and I've done it already. And it is, and I do have to admit that when I was a new doula, I wanted all my clients to have that experience. And then I realized, oh, not everybody wants that experience. I've had clients, no, I booked a scheduled C-section. I just want to have my baby, and that's all. I want you there to hold my hand and to help me with breastfeeding afterwards, but I'm not interested in this whole squat in a lavender field, all natural business, no. And the more clients I came across like that, the more I realized, oh, my job is to be there for you, whatever you want and however you've envisioned your birth to be. This is not about me, because like I've said, I've had my chance. If I want a all natural home birth, I can go have another baby again if I really want it. And it's not my place to imprint my birth wishes onto my client. So no, doulas do not only support people who want unmedicated, all quote unquote natural births. That's not the case. Good doulas support all birthing people.
Okay, we're going to talk about eventually in next few minutes about wellness, birth wellness, what for the mother before and after the birth. But before we get to that point, can you tell us a story, your very best birth story, and one that was a bit more tricky?
All right. That's really hard, because a really good birth experience for me is when I leave a birth and I feel like I have really supported this family, regardless of the outcome. That is what I feel is a really great birth experience. But let me choose one that was so happy from beginning to end. And I'm going to choose it because it's just fresh in my mind. There's so many, I've got many, many great birth stories, but this is one that I just went to last weekend, actually.
The one that you had to cancel our previous, we tried to have this interview last weekend, and this is the birth you're going to tell us. Okay.
So that ended up being a lovely, lovely birth story. And the reason why it was lovely is because not because it went exactly as planned, because it certainly did not, but it was lovely because of a few things that happened. So my clients had planned an all natural birth at the Toronto Birth Center, which is an amazing facility where people go to have their babies. And you know, it's like a home setting, but not at home. And you need to have midwives. Yeah. So my client, unfortunately though, when she had a checkup with her midwives as she was entering labor, her blood pressure was very high. And so they suggested to her that it was not safe for her to birth at the birth center. She needed to birth at the hospital. So we were all very disappointed at that. It was at a hospital that's way in the west end of the city, and I live way in the east end of the city. So I was a little about that. But okay, what's best is best. And her care was now transferred to the hospital. So she no longer was under the care of the midwives. So I felt like, oh, we're really starting off on a bad footing here. They suggested that she be induced because of the BP issues, because her water had broken, et cetera, et cetera. So it just all seemed like all of the things that she wanted were just getting taken away. And so I met them at the hospital when they were starting to be in active labor, which is what I do. Doulas will meet you at the hospital when you're in active labor. And I stepped into that room, and these people, this couple, they had some lovely smooth jazz music on in the background. They had their nice LED candles set up. And she was sitting on the birth ball, just breathing and moaning her way through. Her partner was sitting behind her, rubbing her back. And I walked in, and it was the most beautiful, peaceful, serene, because I was thinking, okay, I got to come in here and help them get to that place. But they'd already gotten there all on their own. And right there onward, even though this birth experience, different from the birth plan, included an epidural, included Pitocin, included all the things they did not want, remained a beautiful, smooth, lovely birth experience. After she had her epidural, me and her partner and I, we gave her foot massages and leg massages and did all the things. We all took naps, we ate snacks together, we laughed and we chatted. And when it was time to push the baby out, the midwives came, the nurses were there, and the obstetrician and the resident came in, and I realized, oh, except for the dad, it was all women in the room. And this amazing, uplifting feeling of female energy just pervaded that room. And as we were all cheering her on as she was pushing, I just was overcome with like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is perfect. And then she only pushed for like 25 minutes, and then her son was born. And I'm like, look at that. Finally, another guy can enter this space. And it was just the most beautiful experience. And she was so happy and smiling. They had done exactly what we talked about and understood that they're not in control, that birth had other plans for them. This is the way that their son was meant to come into the world. The birth center, even though it was a big part of their plans, wasn't in their path. And the acceptance of that, and the beauty of how it all turned out anyways, despite everything going like left.
But they did have a good mindset. So they, even though all these things were taken away, they still had planned.
Makes or breaks.
Whatever they could keep, they kept it, which helped keep them calm. And
exactly. And you're more relaxed. So
this is where your mindset helps with your wellness, right?
100%. It is such an integral part of your birth experience. And I'm not talking about whether or not you have an epidural, whether or not you have a cesarean. I'm talking about when you, 10 years from now, when you look back on that birth experience, are you going to be filled with a feeling of warmth and good sentimental memories, or are you going to be filled with regret and resentment? That's what makes a good birth experience, not the individual outcomes. And I spent a lot of time talking to my clients about that right from the start. That if you are thinking that the purpose of a doula is to help you achieve your unmedicated birth, you're going to be disappointed. I don't have magic powers.
Yeah, you have no control over so many
Oh,
things. You're
I
there to
don't-
support her no matter what the circumstances.
But
That's
I think,
right.
as you said early on at the beginning, you said that because you are there, because of the preparation, there's just a slightly higher chance of achieving a more relaxed
Yes.
birth, I suppose, and kind of less
Yes.
less traumatic or dramatic. But then again, the body does things that you're not prepared, especially when it's your first one. You have no idea how
So-
your body's going to react.
Research shows that continuous labor support results in more positive outcomes, meaning healthier mothers and babies, less cesarean section, less bad outcomes. Epidurals are not considered a bad outcome.
No.
So that's what I'm talking about, is babies and mothers who do not have any complications post-delivery.
Mm.
That is what the clinical outcomes are. That's what they're talking about. Those are the criteria. But what the most important thing for me is, and there's never been a study shown on this, but I absolutely believe with all my heart that continuous labor support, good continuous labor support, leads to more positive birth experiences at the end of the day, which I think is more important than whether or not you had a cesarean, whether or not you had an epidural, whether or not you got what you wanted.
Yeah.
Okay. I especially have those conversations with my VBAC clients, people who come, who hire me because now they're aiming to have a vaginal birth after they've already had one C-section.
So VBAC means vaginal birth after cesarean.
Yes. And we have to talk a lot about mindset in these instances, that most VBACs are successful, most VBAC attempts are successful, but some of them are not. And that what we want to aim for, our goal always is to have a positive birth experience, to feel supported and cared for, and to be respected and treated with dignity during your birth experience. Those are the things that are the most important.
I love all this discussion we're having. It's so great, mashallah. Tell us, can you tell us about a tricky story that happened?
So there, okay, I'll tell you this one. So I left feeling extra overwhelmed and kind of distraught, and had to call my doula friends and my circle, which is another important thing for doulas to have, is doula support with other doulas to kind of debrief situations that are overwhelming and emotional. I've had situations where I personally have been disrespected by doctors and healthcare people. And as a woman of color, and now as an older woman who's a woman of color, I have to be even tougher and stand my ground much more firmly than I did when I was a new doula. I was very intimidated by healthcare professionals. Now I'm not. Now nobody intimidates me. I don't care.
Isn't it your mindset that's doing that?
Yes, that's my mindset. That nobody, I don't care if you're chief of obstetrics.
It's also quite common. Remember, Angela, what we talked about on our episode last week about the menopause?
Yeah.
And it's kind of part of this as well. You reach a point where you're like, you know, I'm no nonsense now. You're not messing with me. I've got a bit of a wisdom in, you know.
Yeah.
So their doctors used to come and stand between me and my clients. Like, I'd be sitting by the bedside and they would come and stand with their butt right in my face. They would do that to talk to the client and ignore me, as literally as if I didn't exist in the room. And now I stand up and go to the other side of the bed and stare right at them. And just so that they know that I'm here, I'm listening. I have a purpose here. I'm not just
exactly.
But that used to be the flavor. So I used to come to births feeling very armored up. But that's not the story I want to tell. The story I want to tell really doesn't have anything to do with treatment from healthcare professionals. It was something that happened after the birth. The birth was fine. It went, sort of straightforward. And as mom was laying down with the baby on her chest, she was speaking to the pediatrician on one side of her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking to the pediatrician, and I was on the other side just standing there listening. And I know the baby's face was like this.
Oh.
So it was basically squashed against the mom's chest.
Forgot, listeners are not, the baby was face down on the mother's chest, right? and I moved the baby's face sideways, just very casually moved the baby's face sideways. The pediatrician said to me, I'm going to examine the baby. It's you are not examining the baby, I am. But I wasn't examining the baby. I was simply moving the baby's face. So that's why I was mentioning my treatment by healthcare professionals, because this reminded me of that. And I was sort of like, I'm not, no, I'm just moving her face. So then I moved away from the bedside because I was, again, whatever. I just let them do their thing. When the doctor left, and I came back, the doctor had been gone for a few minutes. I came back again, the baby was face down on the mother's chest. And as I got closer and I moved the baby's face, the baby was not breathing. The baby literally like white, ashy blue. So I immediately ran in the hallway and called the nurses. The baby was not breathing because the baby was right face down in the mother's breast. And so her nose was plugged like this. This was just minutes after the birth. So they had to run in there, take the baby to the baby room and resuscitate the baby, all over very, very quickly within a minute. But I was so upset because of the interaction I had with the pediatrician beforehand. And then to come back to see that the baby's face, and I stayed out longer. This is what made me feel guilty. I stayed out longer after the pediatrician left because I was pissed off.
Mm.
And then I blamed myself. So maybe if I'd gone in earlier, I would have seen again that the baby, never even occurred to me that the pediatrician should have seen that the baby was face down.
I was going to say, yeah.
Moved the baby. So that baby almost died.
Because the pediatrician's role is not the mother, it's the baby.
Yes.
It's to check that the baby is, yeah.
I think that the emotionality of it just overwhelmed me so much that I left faster than I usually stay about 2 hours after birth, but I felt I was holding my breath the whole time after I went back in and everybody was okay, and then marched quickly to the labor and delivery unit and then burst into tears in the elevator and called my friend, like, sob crying on the phone when I was in my car in the parking garage because of what happened. And that has never ever happened to me. I'm very, very good at even birth situations that turn out pretty scary. I'm very good at separating myself, really good at compartmentalizing my emotional health and my well-being from what happens with my clients. But I'm seeing that baby's face. I still see that baby's face in my head, how her face looked so still and her eyes just were closed like tight, and it scared me so much. And,
so thank God you were there, actually, and you saw it in time. I mean,
now, but back then I had.
Were you worried that potentially, I don't know, I thought you were going to say afterwards that when he examined the baby, there was something wrong and they were trying to blame you because you touched the baby, that the mites, is that something where maybe there's like a gray area, you're not supposed to touch the baby just for your own protection? No, there's nothing like that.
All the time. Touch them all the time.
You touch them all the time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the good things about being so experienced is that I go to one particular hospital all the time because I teach childbirth education classes at that hospital, so the nurses are pretty used to me. So I've been handed babies before to say, here, you hold the baby, because on the verge of throwing up or passing out, and mom is shaky, so I hold the baby. If the mom says give the baby to Suzanne, then they have to give it. I've cut the cord several occasions. Yeah.
I mean, we have informal.
What you
Sorry,
do,
Angela, go ahead.
I love it.
We have informal supports of births anyway. I mean, I had my thank God I had my sister-in-law for all 4 births, and she was fantastic. She really took on the role of a doula without ever had a child before, but we just worked so well together, and we had the plan, and she was just there to keep me calm and relaxed and remember to breathe.
Right. That's exactly So those are the foundations of being a doula right there. All she would need now is a few little tweaks, like at 36 weeks when my client calls me to say, oh, the doctor says that I need to do this test next week. It's called GBS. What's that about? I can explain to her what that is about.
Yeah.
So a big part of my role is to give information.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, oh, you don't need to do that. Don't do it. Forget it. It's stupid. It's just them trying to get money from you. No, that's not my job. My
That
job
might be your opinion, but
it might be my opinion. It might be my feelings. It might be the way that I would do it if I was having a baby. But here's the information. And then I always say, how do you feel about all of that? Or what are your thoughts? And if they're like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And I'll say, talk to me more about why you're not sure. Why aren't you sure? So really examining everything. And then at the end of the day, if they say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that, then I'll be like, all right, excellent. Here are some other things that you can do or questions you can ask to get some more information from your care provider or to support your body in this process. Or yeah.
So for that lady, did you explain to her what was wrong, what she was doing wrong, that she should be careful of for her baby? Or were you hope? Yeah, I suppose you did.
Yes, afterwards, yes. And then I quickly said, okay, so you guys are great then. Okay, bye. I gotta go.
Yeah, that sounds traumatic.
Did really talk about it afterwards because they were kind of traumatized too. So part of my services is that after about a week or two after the baby is born, I will go back. I have another meeting with them, a follow-up, and a big part of that is processing the birth. How do you think things went? How do you feel now? How do you think you'll feel in 5 years and in 10 years? So and so that was a big part of that conversation about how traumatized they were.
That's so important, that because again, some close friends of mine are still trying to process a birth that happened 5 years ago, and they're pregnant. She's pregnant again, and she's worried about things. And so it's so important to be able to talk to someone who you've had a rapport with and who will understand. And also you have that, you're not just a friend, you are someone who also has a bit more knowledge. You've got so much more experience, because you can only have like a handful of birth experience personally yourself, but you've had hundreds of babies, so you can see. But you've got that extra connection that a midwife may not have, because you've not seen your midwife really that often before.
Right.
Especially nowadays that you might not get the midwife that you see originally when it's a practice. So Suzanne, we talked a lot about mindset. Pardon me?
Mindset. Yes, mindset.
Can we talk a little bit now about like physical stuff like nutrition and sleep? How important is it? What do you say to the mother before? Do you give her any nutrition advice, sleep advice, and then afterwards when she has the baby, what do you do? What do you say to her? Like, is that part of your
Well, I'm not a nutritionist.
Obviously.
We can't all be nutritionists. And my issue with pregnancy and nutrition is that my clients come to me late in the game mostly, right? 6 months into pregnancy, and they're already all set in their ways about what they want to eat and so on. That's number one. I send out one of the things that so this is what I do in terms of nutrition and wellness during pregnancy is I send out a newsletter to my clients every 4 weeks, and I always have something in there about wellness, nutrition, sleep, movement, etc. However, I do postpartum work. We haven't touched on that yet. We've talked only about my work as a birth doula, but I am a postpartum doula also, which is super important, supporting people once they've had their babies. And now I talk about nutrition afterwards.
Okay.
Your body has gone through an enormous physiological process. Your uterus literally has the open wound the size of a dinner plate that you are trying to recover from. Okay, maybe you've had a tear or an episiotomy, so you've got stitches that you need to heal from. So this is, I talk to my clients about recovery mode and survival mode, that this time after you have a baby, those first immediate few weeks are extremely vulnerable and need to be treated as such. And mindset is a big part of it, and being vigilant, or you could say mindful, because I don't like words like vigilant and regime because they sound so harsh. You need to be very mindful and cognizant of how vulnerable you are during those early days and weeks. And I feel like having a doula, or your mom or your grandma or your sister or family around you to make you special foods. People in different cultures have different foods that they eat after childbirth. People in different cultures have different rules about things that you should do or shouldn't do, curtailment on activities or socializing or going outside or whatever. A lot of those things on the outside seem silly, but they're not. So listen to your Korean mom when she insists that you wear a sweater and socks. It's July. Or when your mother tells you don't wash your hair for 2 weeks after you have the baby because you'll get sick if your hair gets wet. Some things are not rooted in science, I understand, but I'd still say don't throw all of those things away, okay? There's a kernel of truth in all of those things, and that's what we got to do. We got to root out that kernel and take it and use it to our advantage, couple it with science and what we know now to be really true, and that is how you make the best postpartum recovery experiences possible. And nutrition is a huge role, plays a huge role in that. What does a body need when recovering from a huge injury or a surgery? Those things are important. My practice, my culture, and my belief system says broths and soups and warm liquidy things, and then you
exactly true.
Then you move on to like thicker soupy stewy things, and then you add other things in slowly. That's what I think. You need the collagen for healing. You need as much nutrient dense foods as possible, and you need them to be brought to you in bed also. Hey, that's another thing.
Yeah, and not worry about the still the fat layers all around you. They'll go in their own time. Don't worry early on. Just after the birth, your skin will get back more or less to what it was before.
That's right. One thing that I've done with my clients, I don't always do this. If I have time, I will, but I will also bring them like a case of 12 liters of chicken broth that I make at home, that are all nice and like gelatinous, and you boil that chicken, you put all sorts of herbs, spices, whatever you want in it, but you get all the goodness out of that chicken, and I put it in the 12 jars, and I bring them, and before they have the baby, and I say, put these in your freezer, and then every night you take one out, and then every day you finish one whole jar for the day. Eat other stuff if you want, but make sure
that's what I did for Miriam. I don't know if she had them though. She never did tell me if she finished them.
Yeah. It's
so good. That's really
I want to
good.
talk about one more thing before we have to go, because soon we have to wrap up this interview. Is there like another determinant, like the social determinant? Does that affect social determinants, whether it affects the birth and stuff like that?
Oh,
that you can tell us about.
Yeah, no conversation about how to heal well after postpartum, how to have a good birth would be complete without acknowledging that as much as we have these pieces of knowledge that yes, nutrition is important, yes, being able to sleep well, that people have situations present in their lives that are present in everyday lived realities that make it very, very difficult, if not impossible, to eat the best foods. Like if you don't have money to buy an organic chicken, right? Where are you gonna get this amazing bone broth that I'm talking about? If you don't have that amazing support, people to bring that food for you to shovel your walkway or pay your bills or do the other things you need to do, if you're alone and isolated, if you don't have immigration documents, how can you have good health care? So people have trouble accessing health care. People have trouble accessing good nutrition in all sorts of different ways because of the social determinants of health, which are poverty, immigration issues, domestic violence and isolation, mental health issues, whatever. There are so many social situations present in our lives that make it difficult to access ideal healing. So I do want to acknowledge that the things saying are ideally what we would like for everybody to experience, but not everybody is able to experience that. So when I have many clients who have specific social determinants of health right present in their lives. And so we talk about how we can do the best that we can do
with the circumstances. That's really good.
Yeah, let's
That
start with-
probably that makes them feel empowered. Like it's not because I have that problem or that issue, or you know, I can still access the best.
what can we say? So if I have a single mom and she doesn't have hardly any support after she has the baby, so we're going to work a lot before the baby is born. We're going to make sure that chicken broth is in the freezer already loaded up for her. We're going to really double down on our prenatal visit so that she has stuff set up. We're going to do virtual calls, right? So I can help her with whatever she's going through. We're going to talk about what if the baby's crying and won't stop crying. You don't have a partner to hand off the baby to. What about that? How are you going to do little tips and tricks and strategies to help her get through day to day when she's by herself? Or what kind of foods pack the most nutrition for the least amount of money? That kind of thing.
That's brilliant. That's just amazing. Amazing tips. Yeah.
So we have to keep, is what I'm saying, is not everybody can do all of these wonderful things that we.
Yeah, there are ideals, and then that's what you can do. Yeah, which is what we discussed.
Suzanne, before we wrap it up?
I think we really covered a lot. I'm sure we could go on for a lot longer, and we may have you back, Suzanne, because I mean your stories are just beautiful, and we can't wait to to hear some feedbacks from our listeners.
Put your address, your email address at the we put
everything that afterwards. Yes, we can put. So you want to say something now? Yeah, you have a website, maybe.
Sorry, your friend in the UK who is having another baby and who is trying to process her traumatic birth experience from before, she can reach me because I do virtual support too. That's one thing COVID has taught me, is that we can help each other even when we're not in person, because now look at us talking to each other all the way across the ocean.
Exactly.
Who wants to know a little bit more about me can follow me on Instagram at Doula Suzanne. I also have a website. It's BP Doulas. That's Birth Partners, stands for Birth Partners. bpdoulas.com, and you can read all about my services on there. Yeah, so those are the two main places you can find me.
Brilliant. So Suzanne is spelled, so your Instagram is at Suzanne
Doula Suzanne, SUZANNE.
And Doula is DOULA SUZANNE.
That's right.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Angela, thank you for introducing us to
making
Suzanne.
the time for us to talk to you and to be on our show.
Thank you so much, you guys. It was great.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.
So, inshallah, we'll have another show next week as usual. So we hope you enjoyed this show again, and stay safe, stay healthy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.